A humble mechanic fixed her bike, without knowing it would change his life forever. Have you ever felt like you had everything, yet still felt empty inside? What if the life you worked so hard to build, money, power, fame, was actually the very thing keeping you from true happiness? Imagine this: a stormy night, a deserted road, and a mysterious woman with cold yet sorrowful eyes. A man with calloused hands from years of labor, but a heart warmer than any fire. A chance encounter, or was it destiny? Before we dive into the story, tell us, have you ever stood at the biggest crossroads of your life? Would you choose wealth or a love that money can't buy? Drop a comment below. And if you love stories that touch the heart, don't forget to hit subscribe so you won't miss more emotional journeys ahead. Now let's step into the story, where one decision can change a life forever. The wind lashed against the car windows, raindrops pounding down like the heartbeat of someone on the run. Olivia Williams wasn't the kind of woman who ran. She was a leader, a decision maker, someone who always stayed in control. But now, in the middle of a raging storm on a desolate mountain road, she was faced with a harsh truth. No amount of power in the world could help her escape from herself. Her motorcycle sputtered to a stop in the middle of the road, a perfect curse for a terrible night. Olivia let out a sharp breath, pulled off her gloves, and glanced at the dashboard. The engine was dead. The battery drained, no signal on her phone. As the freezing wind bit into her skin, a question echoed in her mind. Was this a sign that she had taken the wrong road? Not just tonight, but in life. In the distance, headlights pierced through the thick curtain of rain. An old pickup truck slowed down and came to a stop. The door swung open, and a man stepped out. James Anderson didn't like stopping in the middle of the road, especially in a storm. But when he saw her, a woman in sleek leather gear standing next to a high-end motorcycle, he knew he couldn't just drive past. She didn't belong here, and yet here she was. "Bike's dead?" His voice was deep, steady. Olivia looked up, her gaze sharp as a blade. She was used to being judged, a powerful woman among skeptics. But this man didn't seem curious, just someone who saw a person in need of help. "No need." Her pride made the words come out harsher than necessary. James nodded slowly but didn't walk away. "Right, because standing in the rain with a dead bike is obviously your best plan." Olivia bit her lip. She had no options, and she hated that. He crouched down, checking the motorcycle with practiced hands, rough but skilled. After a moment, he stood up and shook his head. "Electrical systems fried. You're not going anywhere tonight." Not going anywhere. The words repeated in her head, heavy like a truth she had been avoiding for far too long. "The town's a few miles down the road," James continued, wiping rain from his face. "I've got a garage there. If you want, I can tow your bike and fix it in the morning." Olivia stared at him, torn between hesitation and the undeniable reality. She had no other choice. "Fine." She stepped into the truck, and the door shut behind her. The cabin was warmer than the storm outside, but it did nothing to calm the tempest brewing inside her. Lightning tore across the sky. Olivia knew this wasn't just an ordinary storm. This was the beginning of something she wasn't prepared for. The wind howled through the mountain cliffs, carrying the sharp scent of cold mist. Olivia Williams hunched lower, gripping the handlebars tightly as the rain began to pour. She wasn't afraid of speed, nor did she shy away from danger. But tonight, there was something unsettling about this empty road. She twisted the throttle, but then, pop! The engine let out a dry, strained noise. The warning lights on the dashboard flickered, and before she could react, the motorcycle jolted violently, lost momentum, and died right there in the middle of the road. "No way!" Olivia gritted her teeth, trying to restart it. Nothing but silence. The rain thickened, swallowing the road ahead. No houses, no streetlights, just an endless stretch of emptiness. Her phone? She pulled it out, but there was no signal. She had ridden too far from the city, leaving behind everything familiar. For the first time in years, Olivia felt trapped. In the distance, headlights cut through the downpour. Her heartbeat quickened. Part of her wanted to wave the vehicle down. Another part was cautious. She knew all too well the stories about strangers on lonely roads at night. A battered pickup truck rolled to a stop in front of her. A man stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, his leather jacket soaked from the rain. He studied her for a moment, his gaze free of curiosity or judgment. Just a man assessing the situation. "Bike's dead?" His voice was deep, steady, but not unkind. Olivia stood tall, keeping her tone level. "I can handle it myself." The man smirked slightly and shrugged. "Then why are you still standing here?" She fell silent. He had a point. He crouched down, quickly checking the engine with sharp, practiced eyes. Within seconds, he stood back up and shook his head. "Electrical system shot. You're not going anywhere tonight." A statement, not a guess. Olivia clenched her fists. The loss of control irritated her. "Lucky for you, I know how to fix bikes," he continued. "My garage is a few miles from here. I can tow it back." She hesitated. She wasn't used to relying on anyone, especially a stranger. But in the middle of a storm, a town she didn't know still seemed like a better option than standing here, waiting for a miracle. Olivia took a deep breath. "What's your name?" "James," he answered, looking her straight in the eye. "James Anderson." She nodded. "All right, James. But if you try anything shady, just know, I'm not easy to take down." James let out a quiet chuckle but said nothing. He simply opened the truck door as if he didn't need to convince her. She knew she had just made a decision, one that might change everything. James Anderson's truck rumbled down the empty roads, windshield wipers working overtime against the relentless rain, as if the sky was trying to wash away the entire town of Cedar Ridge. Inside the cabin, the air was warm, yet neither of them spoke. Olivia Williams sat with her arms crossed, staring straight ahead, her lips pressed tightly together, as if letting her guard down for even a second would reveal something she wasn't ready to share. She was used to being in control, but tonight she had no choice but to trust a stranger. James glanced at her from the corner of his eye, quietly assessing. She wasn't the kind of person he usually saw around here. Expensive leather jacket, a sleek designer watch, and most of all, those eyes. The eyes of someone always ready to fight for something. But tonight, she was just a stranger, caught in the storm. "What brings you out here?" he asked, his tone calm. Olivia blinked, slightly caught off guard. She wasn't used to being questioned. "Just driving." James let out a short chuckle. "Not many people choose to drive through the Blue Ridge Mountains in the middle of a storm." She shrugged but said nothing more. She didn't owe him, or anyone, an explanation. The truck turned down a narrow road, and ahead of them, Anderson Auto Garage came into view. A worn brick building, sturdy but aged, with a warm glow of light spilling from within, standing resilient against the cold, stormy night. James pulled the truck to a stop and stepped out first. Olivia hesitated for a moment before following. The freezing rain hit her skin, but she simply pulled up her collar, refusing to show any sign of discomfort. James unlocked the garage door and led her inside. The space smelled of motor oil, metal, and something else. Something real. A stark contrast to the glass-walled offices she was used to. "You can stay here tonight," he said, nodding toward a small staircase leading to a loft above. "Not exactly luxury, but at least it's dry and safe." Olivia stood still, saying nothing. A part of her wanted to refuse, to leave, to prove she didn't need anyone's help. But another part, the part she had ignored for so long, felt an unexpected sense of relief in this stranger's presence. She gave a small nod. "Fine, but first thing in the morning, I'm gone." James only smirked. "Suit yourself." He walked away, leaving her standing there, between half-repaired cars, oil-stained floors, and the unanswered questions circling in her mind. For the first time in a long time, Olivia had no idea what would happen next, and that both unsettled her and intrigued her. The scent of toasted bread and simmering stew filled the air, mingling with the soft patter of rain still drizzling outside the window. Olivia Williams sat at an old wooden table, staring down at a steaming plate of food. Not the kind served on fine china in the upscale restaurants she was used to, but a simple home-cooked meal that carried a warmth she hadn't expected. James Anderson set a glass of water in front of her before pulling out a chair across from her. "I don't have any aged wine, but the water here is purer than any cocktail you get in the city," he said with a small, knowing smile. Olivia raised an eyebrow, but instead of snapping back, She simply picked up the glass and took a sip. The water was crisp, clear, nothing fancy, yet oddly refreshing. Not bad, she admitted. James chuckled softly but said nothing more. Outside, the rain had softened, the thunder fading into the distance. Inside, the glow of the warm yellow light bathed the space in a quiet, almost unfamiliar peace. One Olivia couldn't remember the last time she had felt. She glanced around. Everything here was simple. No luxurious furniture, no expensive decorations. Just the essentials. Yet each item carried the mark of time and familiarity. A few framed photos on the wall, neatly arranged vintage car models on a shelf. And on the corner of the table, a small wooden box filled with stones of different shapes and colors. She picked one up, rolling it between her fingers. "This yours?" James glanced at it and shook his head. "Number Lily's. My daughter. She loves collecting rocks." Olivia froze for a second. He has a daughter? A part of her was surprised, but another part found it fitting. A man like James, steady, calm, warm, was exactly the kind of person a child could rely on. She set the stone back down, realizing she had just stepped into a part of his life she hadn't expected. "So, where is she?" she asked, keeping her voice neutral. "At a friend's house tonight," James replied, then raised an eyebrow at her. "Surprised?" Olivia shook her head, but she didn't say anything else. She wasn't sure why, but the thought of him having a family, even if it was just the two of them, felt strange. She had always told herself she didn't need anyone. She didn't need a home. She didn't need someone waiting for her at the end of the day. But in this moment, sitting in a modest kitchen, across from a stranger who made her feel safe, she began to wonder if she had been wrong all along. Dinner continued in a comfortable silence. No forced small talk, no empty formalities she had grown used to in her world. Just the quiet clinking of utensils, the soft rhythm of rain against the roof, and an unfamiliar sense of peace settling into her chest. For the first time in years, Olivia didn't feel like she was running from something, and that terrified her more than anything else. Olivia had never pictured James Anderson as a father. He had the demeanor of a lone wolf, independent, composed, and somewhat closed off. But when the garage door swung open the next morning, she realized she had been wrong. The sound of small footsteps echoed across the concrete floor, followed by an excited bark. A little girl, around 10 years old, burst inside, her bright eyes shining, curly hair bouncing with every step. A large golden dog trailed behind her, wagging its tail as if ready to protect her from anything. "Dad, I'm home!" James turned from his workbench, a smile spreading across his face, one Olivia had never seen before. A warm, genuine smile, free of the usual guardedness. "Lily," he greeted, his deep voice softening, "why didn't you wait for me to pick you up? I got a ride with Mr. Parker, and Max missed you too much, so he kept pulling me back home." The girl came to a sudden stop when she noticed Olivia, her brown eyes widening with curiosity. Max, the dog, immediately changed course, trotting toward Olivia, sniffing at her leather jacket as if trying to decide whether she was trustworthy. Olivia blinked, feeling strangely out of place under the scrutiny of both a child and a dog. Lily didn't say anything right away. She simply examined her from head to toe, her gaze sharper than most kids her age. "Who are you?" Lily asked bluntly. Olivia raised an eyebrow. Part of her wanted to respond with the same directness, but James spoke up first. "This is Olivia," he said evenly. "She got caught in the storm last night. I'm fixing her bike." Lily tilted her head. "You got stuck in a storm? On a motorcycle?" "Yeah," Olivia shrugged. "Don't ask why." The girl frowned slightly as if trying to determine what kind of person Olivia was. Then unexpectedly she smiled. "Do you know how to skip rocks?" Olivia blinked. "What?" Lily shrugged. "Just a question. My dad taught me how to make rocks bounce on the lake. Want to try?" James let out a quiet chuckle. Olivia glanced at him, then back at Lily. A part of her wanted to refuse, but there was something about the girl's expression, an innocent curiosity, a silent invitation that didn't feel forced yet, somehow chipped away at the walls Olivia always kept up. "All right," Olivia said, crossing her arms. "But just so you know, I'm probably terrible at it." Lily beamed. "That's okay. Max sucks at it too. You can practice together. Olivia glanced at the dog, who wagged his tail enthusiastically, as if he had already decided she was a good person. James stood nearby, arms crossed, a subtle smirk on his lips as if watching something amusing unfold. Olivia exhaled slowly. She had signed million-dollar contracts, outmaneuvered some of the sharpest minds in business. But this morning, for the first time in her life, she was about to learn how to skip rocks. And somehow, that unsettled her more than anything else. Olivia walked slowly down the main street of Cedar Ridge, her leather shoes tapping lightly against the cobblestone pavement. The morning sun cast a golden glow over the small shops, the bakery exuding the warm, buttery scent of freshly baked bread, and the corner cafe where locals gathered as part of their daily routine. She could feel their eyes on her, not blatantly, but just enough for her to notice that she was an outsider. In New York, she was used to being watched, but here it carried a different meaning. It wasn't admiration, nor was it judgment. It was curiosity mixed with a hint of caution. Why was she here? Who was she? And more importantly, what was her connection to James Anderson? Olivia couldn't deny that she was asking herself the same questions. She stopped in front of a small shop, David's General Store. It looked unassuming, yet something about it drew her in. As she stepped inside, the bell above the door chimed softly. Behind the counter, a middle-aged man was reviewing a ledger. He glanced up, his sharp eyes giving her the distinct impression that he had been expecting her. "Olivia Williams, right?" His voice was deep and steady. She raised an eyebrow. "Should I be surprised you know my name?" David Young set his pen down, leaned against the counter, and crossed his arms. "Small town, Miss Williams. News travels faster than last night's storm." She nodded, not arguing the point. It wasn't unexpected. David studied her for a moment before speaking again, his tone slow, deliberate. "You here because of James Anderson?" Olivia tilted her head slightly, sensing the shift in the air. "I just happened to run into him." David let out a small chuckle, but there was no belief in his expression. "You know he wasn't always just a mechanic, don't you?" That made Olivia pause. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice calm but her eyes sharp. David rested his hands on the counter, his gaze darkening. "James used to be someone else, a past he doesn't talk about, and doesn't want anyone else bringing up either." "What past?" David hesitated, as if debating whether to continue. Finally, he exhaled. "I'm just saying, make sure you know what you're getting yourself into." Olivia's entire body tensed. David's warning was vague, but it was enough to plant a seed of doubt in her mind. James Anderson, the man with calloused hands, the deep eyes that carried a weight he never spoke of. Who had he been before? As Olivia stepped out of the store, her mind was more unsettled than ever. But there was one thing she knew for certain. She couldn't leave Cedar Ridge until she found out the truth. Olivia wasn't sure exactly what was keeping her in Cedar Ridge. Maybe it was because her bike still wasn't fixed. Maybe it was because of Lily, with her bright eyes lighting up every time she proudly showed off a new rock she had found. Or maybe it was because of James, the quiet man who somehow made her feel safer than anyone she had ever met. Whatever the reason, she stayed. And on one golden afternoon, with the sunlight casting a warm glow over the town, she found herself standing in the middle of the fair, a ring in her hand, facing James and Lily, who both wore teasing smiles. "You sure about this?" Lily tilted her head, skepticism in her voice. "Do you want me to explain the rules again?" Olivia narrowed her eyes, gripping the ring tighter. "Thanks, but I can handle it." She took a deep breath, closed her eyes for a second to focus, and then threw. The ring sailed through the air, hovering in a moment of suspense, before landing off target. Lily burst into laughter, and James shrugged, amused. "I'm guessing this won't be your new career path." Olivia sighed, crossing her arms. "Fine, I admit it. I'm terrible at these games." Lily's eyes gleamed. "Then you need practice." "Practice?" Olivia raised an eyebrow. "Yep. You have to keep playing until you win." Before Olivia could protest, James chuckled, bent down to pick up the ring, and placed it back in her hand. "Try again? Or are you afraid to lose?" Olivia stared at him. It wasn't a challenge. Not exactly. It was something more subtle. an invitation, a chance to let go of everything she thought she knew and try something different. She tightened her grip on the ring, this time focusing harder. She threw again, and this time it landed perfectly around the target. Lily let out an excited cheer. "You did it!" Olivia laughed, the thrill of victory washing over her, even if it was just a simple carnival game. James watched her, something unreadable in his gaze. They spent the rest of the afternoon wandering through the fair, eating cotton candy, and watching Lily try every game she could find. Olivia couldn't remember the last time she had done something this simple. No pressure, no expectations, no one watching her every move. Just laughter, fleeting moments of pure fun, something she had never thought to cherish before. And then, in a brief moment, when James stood beside her, his shoulder just inches from hers, his eyes reflecting the glow of the carnival lights, she realized that feeling in her chest wasn't loneliness anymore. It was something far more dangerous, something she wasn't ready to name. She was starting to like him, and that was the scariest part of all. Soft country music played in the background, blending with the laughter and chatter of the fairgoers. Paper lanterns swayed gently in the night breeze, casting a warm, golden glow, creating an atmosphere Olivia never thought she would enjoy so much. But it wasn't the lights that held her attention. It was the man standing in front of her. James extended his hand, his gaze steady, warm, yet carrying an unspoken challenge. "Do you dare to try?" Olivia chuckled, shaking her head. "I don't think country dancing is my thing." "No one gets it right the first time," James shrugged, his hand still outstretched. "But sometimes all it takes is the right partner." She hesitated for a moment. In her world, dancing meant elegant waltzes in grand ballrooms, where every step had to be flawless. But here, under the Cedar Ridge night sky, maybe imperfection was exactly what she needed. She placed her hand in his. James pulled her in gently. No rush, no pressure. They moved with the rhythm of the song, her feet gliding over the wooden floor, unburdened by expectations or precision. Olivia found herself laughing, feeling lighter than she had in years. And then, it happened. James leaned in, his eyes searching hers for permission. Olivia didn't pull away. She didn't want to run. When their lips met, the world faded into the background. All she could hear was her heartbeat. All she could feel was the warmth of his fingertips grazing her back. And all she could think was that maybe, just maybe, this was where she belonged. But happiness was always fragile. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She blinked, still in James's arms. But reality had already clawed its way back. She stepped back, reaching for her phone. "Charlotte." She swallowed hard before answering. "Olivia, finally! I've been calling you for hours." Charlotte's urgent voice came through. "We have an emergency board meeting tomorrow morning. You need to be back in Chicago immediately." Olivia gripped the phone, her chest suddenly heavy. James didn't ask, but she knew he had heard. She took a deep breath, looking up at him. "I have to go." James nodded, but his eyes held something she wasn't ready to face. Disappointment, or worse, the quiet understanding that this was inevitable. Olivia had no words. She wanted to explain, to tell him this wasn't her running away, that she didn't want to leave. But how could she say that when she wasn't sure if she could stay? So instead, she said the only thing she could. "Goodbye, James." He didn't stop her. He didn't try to make her stay. But as she walked away, her steps felt heavier than ever. For the first time in her life, Olivia was leaving. But it felt like she was losing something far more important. Chicago greeted Olivia with neon lights, bustling streets, and the ever-present tension of a city that never slept. She stepped out of the private car, her heels clicking firmly against the marble floor of Williams Corporation's towering headquarters. Everything was exactly the same, but she wasn't. "Welcome back, Miss Williams." Charlotte approached quickly, handing her a stack of documents. "I've scheduled the board meeting. The press conference starts in 15 minutes and—" Olivia didn't hear the rest. Everything felt like it was passing through a fog. She could sense the familiar rhythm, big decisions, profit margins, strategic handshakes, but somehow none of it moved her the way it used to. No excitement, no sense of victory, just an invisible emptiness settling inside her. She entered the press conference room, flashes from cameras erupting the moment she walked in. Reporters were poised, ready to capture her every word. Olivia sat down, adjusting the microphone in front of her, taking a slow, steady breath. Charlotte stood beside her, signaling for her to begin. "Miss Williams." A journalist in the front row raised his hand, his tone sharp. "After your unexpected absence, you've returned and immediately closed a multi-billion-dollar deal. Does this mean you are fully committed to Williams Corporation?" A simple question, one Olivia should have answered without hesitation. But instead she paused. The silence stretched longer than it should have. Charlotte shot her a worried glance. The reporters exchanged looks, their pens poised to capture every second of this moment. Finally, Olivia exhaled. "I don't know." The room erupted in murmurs. Journalists scrambled to take notes, cameras zooming in on her face. Charlotte went pale. "Olivia," she raised a hand, stopping Charlotte before she could continue. For the first time, she didn't care about the flawless image she had spent years perfecting. She didn't care about the media's reaction or what the board of directors would think, because for the first time, she was speaking the truth. "I don't know if I still want to be CEO." Olivia looked out at the crowd, and her voice no longer held the icy confidence it once did. It carried something else: doubt, longing, and something even she couldn't fully name. Outside, the city pulsed with life, but inside Olivia, a storm larger than anything she had ever faced was brewing, and she knew it was time to make a choice. Olivia stood in the top floor office of Williams Corporation, gazing out at the glittering skyline of towering skyscrapers. Everything she had ever wanted was right in front of her: power, prestige, staggering profit margins. But none of it meant anything anymore. Her fingers hovered over her phone screen, a message from Charlotte flashing across the display. "Board meeting in 30 minutes. Your presence is required." A week ago, Olivia wouldn't have hesitated. A week ago, she would have walked into that room, signed billion-dollar deals, and continued down the path she had built with ambition and relentless effort. But now, she set the phone down on her desk. Her fingers trembled slightly as she opened a new email and typed, slowly, deliberately, "Cancel the meeting. I won't be attending." The moment she hit send, a strange sensation washed over her, liberating, yet terrifying. She had never walked away from anything in her life, but this time, she wasn't just walking away from a meeting. She was walking away from the life she once thought was the only one meant for her. For the first time, she wasn't running away from something. She was running toward it. The flight back to Cedar Ridge felt longer than she expected. As the plane landed at the small airport just outside town, Olivia found herself forgetting how to breathe steadily. She didn't know if James would want to see her. She didn't know what would happen next. But she knew one thing: she couldn't live the rest of her life without trying. The taxi carried her down winding roads, past sprawling fields and rolling green hills. Landscapes she had once sped past without a second thought. But this time, she truly saw them. Cedar Ridge hadn't changed, but she had. Her heart pounded as the car pulled up in front of James's garage. The bay door was half open, warm yellow light spilling onto the pavement, the sound of tools clanking against metal filling the quiet night air. She took a deep breath and stepped out. As she reached the entrance, James emerged, sleeves rolled up to his elbows, his deep blue eyes darkening at the sight of her. They stood there, locked in silence, neither speaking. Finally, Olivia found her voice, soft but steady. "I was wrong to leave." James didn't react right away. But then, he set his rag down, walking toward her slowly, his expression free of anger or blame. There was only one question in his eyes. "Are you staying this time?" Olivia swallowed hard, then nodded. "This time I'm staying." Olivia stood at the entrance of Anderson Auto, where the warm garage light spilled onto the pavement, casting a soft glow against the twilight sky. The familiar scent of oil and metal lingered in the air, but this time, she was no longer a stranger. James was there, sleeves rolled up, streaks of grease smudged across his strong forearms. He looked up as she approached, his blue eyes darkening for a moment. No surprise, no rushed questions, just something deeper, like he had known this moment was coming. "I knew you'd come back," James said, his voice low, steady, without a trace of arrogance. Olivia swallowed hard. She had rehearsed this moment for hours, on the flight, on the long drive from Chicago to Cedar Ridge. But standing in front of him now, all the words tangled in her throat. I, she took a breath, her hands tightening at her sides. I was scared, James. He didn't speak, just watched her, waiting. She met his gaze, summoning the last of her courage. Scared that if I stayed, I'd lose myself. Scared that I don't know how to love someone without conditions. Scared that I've spent my whole life running from what I really wanted. James tilted his head slightly, his voice gentle yet certain. And now? She exhaled and took a step closer. Now I'm only afraid of one thing. Losing you. Silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken words. Olivia could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her chest, unsure of what he would say, unsure if he could forgive her for leaving. But James didn't say anything. He simply stepped forward, slowly, but with certainty. And then he kissed her. It wasn't rushed, wasn't possessive. It was a welcome, an acceptance, a quiet confirmation that she belonged here, with him. When they pulled apart, James rested his forehead against hers, his voice soft in the stillness of the garage. Don't run anymore, Olivia. She closed her eyes, letting his warmth surround her. I'm not running this time, she whispered, and for the first time in her life, she truly believed it. Olivia stood at the entrance of Anderson Auto, taking a deep breath. The morning sun cast a warm glow over everything, from the weathered garage sign to the haphazardly parked cars inside. But what truly made this place feel like home wasn't the surroundings. It was the man bent over the hood of a pickup truck, checking the engine, and the little girl nearby, completely absorbed in drawing something on the concrete with colored chalk. James looked up when he saw her, a small smile tugging at his lips. You look more comfortable standing there than the last time. Olivia chuckled. Last time, I thought this was just a stop along the way. James wiped his hands on a grease-stained rag and walked toward her. And now? She looked up at him, her smile lingering. Now I think this is where I want to stay. He raised an eyebrow but didn't say anything, just waited. Olivia reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, handing it to him. James took it, unfolded it, and his expression darkened with surprise. You actually did it? His voice was quieter now, not with doubt, but with disbelief. Olivia nodded. I sold all my shares in Williams Corporation. As of today, I'm no longer the CEOA light breeze passed through, carrying the faint scent of motor oil from the garage. Olivia watched him, knowing he wasn't the type to react impulsively. Finally, he let out a long breath, folded the paper, and tucked it into the back pocket of his jeans. So what's next, Miss Williams? He asked, half teasing, half genuinely curious. She crossed her arms, tilting her head at him. I think I'll try my hand at investing. I heard there's a small garage in need of some capital for expansion. James chuckled, shaking his head. You just sold a billion-dollar corporation, and now you want to invest in an old auto shop? It's not just an auto shop. Olivia took a step closer, her voice softer now. It's a life I actually want. James held her gaze for a long moment before finally responding, not with words, but by pulling her in, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. No rush, no need for explanations. Just understanding. From a distance, a small voice called out, Dad! Miss Olivia! Lily came running toward them, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Max trotted behind her, wagging his tail as if he were part of the conversation. The little girl held up a sheet of paper. I drew this for you, Miss Olivia. Olivia knelt down to take it. It was a crayon drawing, a small house, a pickup truck, a dog, and 3 people standing under a bright, sunny sky, holding hands. Olivia swallowed hard, her throat tightening with emotion. This is beautiful, Lily grinned. So, are you staying? Olivia glanced at James. He didn't need to say anything. The answer was already there. She smiled. I'm staying. And this time she had no doubt about it. An afternoon in Cedar Ridge. Afternoons in Cedar Ridge were more peaceful than anything Olivia had ever known. No more stifling boardrooms, no more endless phone calls, No more strategic handshakes. Just her, James, Lily, and Max. A life that didn't require fighting to hold on to. She sat on the garage steps, a steaming cup of coffee in her hands. The soft breeze carried the scent of earth after the rain, and for the first time in years, she felt like she was truly breathing. James sat beside her, quiet as always. But this silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was an understanding, a shared truth that needed no words. All the things I once thought mattered, Olivia murmured, gazing into the distance. Money, power, status. Now I realize none of it compares to this feeling. James didn't turn to look at her, but she could hear the quiet smile in his voice. So you finally figured it out? She chuckled, leaning her head against his shoulder. Yeah, and it took me way too long to understand something so simple. From the backyard, Lily came running, carrying a small box filled with colorful stones. Miss Olivia, which one do you like best? Olivia glanced down, picking up a small blue stone, its smooth surface cool against her fingers. She didn't know much about rocks, but this one made her feel at peace. This one. Lily nodded in approval. Good, because I'm adding it to my collection of important things. James raised an eyebrow. And what's that? The little girl grinned. It's a collection of things I never want to lose. Olivia froze for a moment. That simple sentence struck something deep inside her. She was no longer afraid of losing power, of losing influence. The only thing she feared now was losing them. She reached out, pulling Lily into a hug. Max immediately jumped up, tail wagging furiously as if demanding to be part of the moment. James watched them, and for the first time, there was no hesitation in his eyes. Only certainty. And that was what Olivia had truly been searching for all along. A love that didn't need proving, didn't need winning, didn't require sacrificing who she was to deserve it. And now, a question for you. Have you ever stood at a crossroads that could change your life forever? Would you be willing to let go of everything familiar to chase what truly makes you happy? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Olivia has found her path. Now it's your turn. If this story touched your heart, hit subscribe to join us for more deeply moving journeys about love, connection, and life-changing decisions. Turn on notifications so you don't miss our next unforgettable adventure. Thank you for being here. And never forget, sometimes true happiness isn't found in the things we chase for a lifetime, but in the people who stand by us, no matter what. Valuable lessons from this story. Life often leads us to crossroads we never expected. Olivia Williams spent her entire life chasing power, prestige, and wealth, believing it was the only path to happiness. But as it turns out, what we perceive as success can sometimes be the very thing that traps us in loneliness. Her story reminds us that happiness isn't measured by wealth or status, but by the moments we truly connect with those around us. From a cold-hearted billionaire who only knew contracts and numbers, Olivia learned the value of simplicity, sincerity, and unconditional love. James was not society's definition of a perfect man. He wasn't wealthy, didn't have a high-profile career, but he had a kind heart and a life filled with true meaning, something Olivia had lost in her pursuit of success. And when she found the courage to give everything up to rediscover herself, she realized that the most important thing in life isn't what we own, but who we choose to share it with. Ultimately, this story teaches us that sometimes walking away isn't failure. It's choosing a new path that's truly worth it. Happiness isn't some distant destination. It's found in life's simplest moments, a warm meal, a loving embrace, or a quiet town where we finally feel at home.